Here it is. The Chicago sound basically was Bud Herseth. The Chicago teaching was people like Arnold Jacobs, Vince Chigwitz, and you could name probably about 800 more people that tried to figure out what Bud was doing and tried to teach it. I'm not kidding. And they could put it into words, and they wanted to do it. And they were very good at analyzing it. Some of them got a little carried away, went overboard. Bud didn't do that at all. Bud was a player. The only way he ever taught was get a good model. You know, if there wasn't one around, he'd play it for you. He said, go home and practice, figure it out yourself. That's it. Golf teachers have done the same thing. They take somebody that was a phenomenal Bobby wrong name. What?
Bobby Jones.
Bobby Jones, thanks. Exactly. Bobby Thompson hit the home run, didn't he? Bobby Jones. Somebody like that, you know, a guy that could hit a ball 100 yards down and make it go through a tire that's hanging. How did he do that? Well, guess what? All those theorists wanted to figure it out. How did Bach write all that stuff? He probably didn't study the same theory that we're studying, because this theory is about Bach. There's always going to be people that will figure out what they're doing. So as good players came into the orchestra, one by one after Herseth came in, everybody tried to match the sound, the volume. I'll tell you what happened. I mean, I saw it happening when I was there. I felt a responsibility when I moved from fourth to second to play louder. I felt a responsibility. Everybody does. Pretty soon, and if it's in tune, pretty soon there's a bigger, healthier, freer, more brilliant, in-tune sound from the brass section. It became the golden brass. When Herseth first came around, do you know how different he was from the East Coast? They hated it. And he came from New England Conservatory. That's where he was. Voisin was in school about the same time with him. And he got the job at Boston. As a kid, real young little kid. And Bud came from there, came to Chicago. But there was such a difference between the Vacchiano and the Krause in Philadelphia. Sam Krause, before, what's his name? Who's down in Florida now? Thank you. I grew up hearing Krause and then Gill. And Gill was a much different player. But a lot of those players, even Voisin, super strong, incredibly strong, but abrasive. And Herseth, when he played louder, it still stayed incredibly refined and beautiful. When he played softer, it stayed the same thing. So, you know, we could talk about this a lot, but the Chicago sound is now all over the world. First of all, Phil Smith, first job, Chicago Symphony. And that's the way he sounds. Mike Sachs, same thing. Strong, free, big. Everybody plays with that now. But a long time ago, it wasn't the case. Ozawa right away realized what the brass section was like in Chicago when he was conducting at Ravinia, and he, with his own account at first, took his own money and hired all these brass players and brought them over to Japan every summer. Martinon did the same thing at the Paris Conservatory. The advent of recordings and touring, pretty soon, most people preferred the Chicago sound, but it wasn't the case a long time ago. So it got labeled, but there's nothing really different from the most beautiful sounds you hear. It's the same. In other words, it's free, beautiful, strong, big. So that's what you've been hearing around here, and that's what you all need to do. Where is my friend that played the Caprice? Who was it? One I nailed for being so soft. Is he here? Oh, there you are. Yeah, Rustics, I'm sorry. Okay. And you know, wow, what a difference. You know, I couldn't even speak to you because they were applauding already. And you really did sound like a trumpet. I got the same thing. I came to Northwestern my freshman year, and Chikowicz just kept saying, well, I'd like to hear you on a Bach trumpet. I was playing a Schilke C. And he said, could you play a little louder? Could you play louder? I got into lyric opera my junior year, started my junior year to play principal trumpet. Good job. He called me up. He said, that's a man-sized job. You need a man-sized trumpet. Come on over. I have an extra Bach C. I used his extra Bach C trumpet, And then, right during that season, Vincent Bach sold his company to Summer, and they moved to Elkhart, Indiana. And they threw a trumpet together, C trumpet, sent it around to all the orchestras to prove that they hadn't lost anything, because Summer was nothing with trumpets except piccolos at that time, except Bach. And Vincent was dying. I mean, he was old. He just wanted to get out of the business and do something. So they bought the name, basically. And so Chickowitz called me up and he said, I've got the first C trumpet they put together. They've been sending it around. It's not plated yet. Do you want it? He said, it's good. Okay. So I got that. It had an Elkhart bell stamped on it and still a Mount Vernon valve section. And it was the pits. I don't have it anymore. It was terrible. Talk about pitch on the open 5 notes. Really sharp low C, flat G as you could get. This C was pretty good. The other notes were bad. Real sharp high C. It was terrible. And it was a real dark sounding horn. So I played for about 4 years and got another one. But anyway, that's what the concept was. I mean, I was a tiny little player. He kept wanting to play out. And in those days, if I played an audition today, and even 25 years ago, the way I played an audition for Chicago Symphony when I got in, if I'd play it today the way I played then, there wouldn't be a chance. Because I was a light player. Light, accurate, clean, fast, could transpose. I'd never played a Brahms or Beethoven symphony when I got to Chicago Symphony. I had a lot of orchestra experience, but just never played one of those. But I was a light player. I learned to play loud. You don't not learn to play loud playing in that orchestra. And 5 years later, I was embarrassed that I was playing in the loudest orchestra in the world. And it was. And it was the loudest brass section. I was embarrassed. We couldn't play in Washington, D.C. We couldn't play in that big box of a hall. The orchestra was too loud for that hall. It became the loudest brass section. So it's just not loud. That's not the Chicago sound. Don't misunderstand. Get the old recordings and listen to Herseth. It finally got to the point where a few players could actually play louder than Herseth, like George Vosburgh. And he did, playing second trumpet. He misunderstood the point. But I watched every new brass player join that orchestra, and each one of them had the same feeling I did. I got to play loud to match. I've got to play louder. Everybody did that. So guess what? The brass section got louder and louder and louder. And for years, Bud still could ride on top. But he couldn't outdo George. Of course, he was getting old, too. But he did for years. And that became the concept of playing first trumpet in an orchestra. When I went down to Houston Symphony, I already told you what my background was. I was a light player. I learned to play loud, and I could keep up with Bud, but I was playing second, And I played second on a lot of recordings. It was a very sought-after orchestra recordings during the 4 years I was playing second. I went down to Houston, and I did not think of myself even then as a loud player. And after playing for 3 weeks, the tuba player, Warren Deck, who then went to New York, and the bass trombonist, Dave Waters, came up to me and said, yes, you sound great. It's really fun. But we have to tell you, we're not used to playing this loud. But if you want, we'll get some different equipment. What? What an insult. I couldn't believe it. But I was playing what I heard. I was riding on top. And I've got a recording of a Mahler 5 we did my second year. And boy, it was fun. Now, just to let you know how things have changed, about 4 years ago, oh no, longer than that, 7 years ago, it was the same year that Bud had his bypass surgery. I was just finishing up. Barbara and I took a year off from Eastman, and we went down to Houston and played associate principal to give Jim Will a chance to see if he wanted to stay in New York. He's the associate principal. So I went back to my orchestra and played associate principal. I did the second half of the year. We did Lutoslawski Concerto for Orchestra. I played third or fourth, I don't know, on that one. And that orchestra, same hall, played that piece so loud I was stunned. It wasn't the same orchestra. I left Houston in 1981, and this was 1994, 1995. It was incredible. This was now an orchestra trying to sound like Chicago. John DeWitt, first trumpet, studied in Evanston right here, studied right here. Yeah. Strong, incredibly strong. Jim Wilt came to me after 2 years in Houston and was worried that he'd be able to keep the job because he couldn't play loud enough. Came back to me. He was a student of mine. And I said, "You're fine. I actually know that they like you because you are the opposite from John. You're the delicate, light player. They want you. Don't worry about it. But keep trying. He's a stronger player now." Just by chance, I had to leave Houston that year. I missed the last week because I was asked at the last minute to play this Japanese tour for Bud when he had his bypass surgery. And now first time I ever played first trumpet in Chicago Symphony after 12 years. I'm playing half the first stuff. It was a ball. And it was Mark Ridenauer's first year. He was on probation. So it was a fun time. He was the only one from the section. Tim Kent couldn't fly. Will Scarlett was still from his concussion. 5 ringers and Mark Ridenauer on probation. And this section was great. It was really great. Channing Philbrick, Matt Comerford. What's the second player now in Pittsburgh? Neil Berntsen. And Jeff Hickey and myself. So, we played Lutoslawski, Concerto for Orchestra. Chicago cycled. It was half the volume. Half the volume. Bud wasn't there. Michael Mulcahy's in the trombone section. He talks to the brass. He tries to get the volume down all the time. And he is a strong player. Chicago Symphony doesn't play loud like they did, but the rest of the world has followed them, and they're trying to. So all those animals out there that listened to Chicago for 20 years now are trying to do the same thing, and Chicago's not. Isn't it ironic? Strange. So those are my viewpoints about the Chicago sound. Invented by accident by the most beautiful, gorgeous trumpet player that ever played in an orchestra that I know of. And everybody just followed suit and tried to fit in, fortunately.